Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Board of Adjustments for the City of Tempe, February 26, 2020. I'd like to introduce the board members that we have with us. Actually, our tradition is that each board member introduces themselves. If we could start at my right, please.
Jack Confer.
Kevin Collins.
James Frazee, Vice Chair.
I'm Chairman David Lyon.
Richard Watson.
Whitney Baker.
Ron Keggy.
And by way of city staff, we have with us Brittany Nelson and Mr. Steve Abrahamson. We also have Robbie Aaron. We have Jeff Tomilovich. And, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. Hector Heredia. Thank you. Okay, so let me read our preamble here. The City of Tempe Board of Adjustment is authorized by the Arizona Revised Statutes and the City of Tempe Zoning Ordinance. Its function is to grant relief where a literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance would result in an unnecessary property hardship, to interpret provisions of the zoning ordinance for variances, and to hear appeals from any person or city official aggrieved by the decision of a person responsible for the enforcement of the zoning ordinance, which by which we mean zoning administrator and hearing officer abatements. The board has the City of Tempe Community Development Staff Summary Reports on the items being considered at this meeting, and will use this report in their deliberations. All right, so we only have one main item of business, but before we do that, we have some meeting minutes to consider from previous meetings, and there's a laundry list of them, so bear with us if you will. We have study session and regular session meeting minutes for 3 different meetings. And because we were absent in various capacities, we'll take motions on them separately. So we have considered these meeting minutes, and we have addressed some corrections that need to be made. Ms. Nelson, can you tell me again which one was it that you wished for us to hold off on? Okay, and I see before me October 23rd, November 20th, and December 22nd.
Should be January, not December.
Okay. It's interesting. Okay, so in the agenda, on the document it says January, but in the agenda it actually says, oh no, I apologize. I'm reading that wrong. It's 012220, which works out to January 22nd of 20 rather than, sorry, I was seeing that as a 12. I apologize. All right. So once again, so the January 22nd, do you wish for us to hold off on both sets of minutes? All right. So we'll just do October and November, please. All right. So may I hear a motion regarding the approval of October 23rd's study session minutes, please?
I'll make a motion to approve October 23rd study session and regular meeting minutes.
Let's do them separate in case.
Okay, study session minutes.
All right. Do I hear a second, please?
Second.
Okay, motion to approve from Vice Chair Frazee, seconded by Board Member Watson. All those in favor by show of hands, please. Opposed, if any? In abstention? Okay, motion passes 5-0 with board members Baker and Kege in abstention. Can we hear a motion regarding the regular session minutes for October 23rd, please?
I motion that we approve the regular session minutes.
Can I hear a second, please?
Second.
Okay, so motion to approve from Board Member Watson and seconded by Vice Chair Frazee. All those in favor by show of hands, please. Opposed, if any, and abstaining. Okay, this motion also passes 5-0 with Board Members Baker and Kege abstaining. November 20th study session minutes, please.
I move that we approve the study session for November 20th.
A second.
All right, motion to approve from Board Member Cullen, seconded by Board Member Baker. All those in favor by show of hands, please. Opposed, if any? In abstention? Motion passes 4-0 with Chairman Lyon, Board Member Watson, and Board Member Kege in abstention. Let's do the regular session minutes, please.
I motion that we approve the regular session minutes for November 20th.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Okay, motion approved from Board Member Baker and seconded by Board Member Cullens. All those in favor by show of hands, please. Opposed? In abstention. All right, motion passes 5-0 with Board Members Watson and Kege in abstention. All right, so now that we've taken care of those items of business, we come to our main item of business. Mr. Van Egmond, would you like to come to the podium and present your case? I've been told that
Thank
you
you,
have
Mr.
a significant amount of evidence. Is that correct?
Is that all right?
I can hear you all right, yes?
All right. Thank you. I welcome the opportunity to come before you and explain to a group of concerned citizens about my yard and the actions the city wants to take on it. I'm as concerned about the quality of our community as are all of you, and that's the reason I'm coming before you. Just as a bit of a background to begin with, I am a college professor, I used to be, so I'm used to talking at great length. However, I do welcome any questions that you might have along the way if there's something that needs to be clarified. The other two comments are somewhat personal. One is that I'm somewhat hard of hearing, so I have a hard time. If you do ask a question, I may have a hard time hearing it, for which I have an assistant. I'm also nearsighted, so that I can't read your name tags, so I won't be able to address you personally. And a third thing is that I recently developed a somewhat serious heart condition. It was in the hospital for 2 days. I believe it is being controlled at the moment by medications, but one of the symptoms is dizziness and mental confusion. So this will be the longest I've tried to talk and develop an idea at length since that happened, so hopefully everything will go well. I'm going to make two main points to you tonight. The first is that my yard is in complete compliance with all the provisions of the city code regarding landscaping. It is now and it always has been. There is nothing that needs to be abated. All the differences between me and the city inspector are a result of differing interpretations of a complex and poorly written code, or just a matter of personal taste and opinion. But I think the most important reason I'm coming before you is because my yard, in my view, is in keeping with the new standards which the City Council has set out regarding climate change and sustainability. As many of you know, or all of you should know, last year in December, the City Council formally adopted the Climate Action Plan, committing the city to do everything it possibly can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and encouraging the growth of trees and other vegetation in order to reduce summertime high temperatures. Among some of the quotes in this booklet speaks specifically of emissions reductions, constructing green infrastructure to help grow vegetation to cool our urban area, adopting an urban forestry master plan to expand the urban tree canopy and cultivating cool landscapes and urban shade. That is a quote, cultivating cool landscapes in order to help mitigate summer temperatures. This is the city's council's commitment to our program in our city. But of course, the city council can only commit to doing things for city projects and city property. It can't command all of us to do the same. Therefore, it is up to us, as the citizens of Tempe, to do our part to support these goals on our own properties. This is what I am doing. This is what I have been doing even before the council got interested for about the past 5 to 10 years, moving towards what I believe is what I know is a far more sustainable and, in their words, cool yard. Unfortunately, the city code enforcement department does not see it this way. In my view, they are still looking at yards with the old eyes and old standards, trying to develop, trying to maintain yards as they were in the 20th century, not as they need to be in the 21st century if we are going to be serious about climate change and sustainability. Jim, if you could do the first one, let's see, 1A, A1, 1A, 2A, and then 3A. I'm going to be showing a fair number of photographs. This is the house, just looking, this is what we expect a Tempe yard or any American yard to look like. This happens to be the first house on my block, William Street, 1602. A few trees, mainly a large expanse of closely cut green grass, turf grass, one small bush along the wall, and one tree. Number 2, this is the house next to it. Again, large expanse of thing, a few small bushes in front of the house, and a large palm tree. And then number 3. And this is what my house looks like, which is 2 houses down. Obviously, if you're used to looking at the close-cut green grasses, close-cut green lawn, turf lawn, this is going to come as quite a shock. The inspector, of course, sees it as overgrown and deteriorated, claiming that there is no, that it has been allowed to grow wild, as some people have called it. What we have, of course, is a full tree canopy. 1, 2, 3, 4 trees of various sizes. There's also a few saplings growing, which you can't really see there, but so these will be there to provide shade in additional spots as well as into thing. As well as if any of these trees die, they'll be there to replace them. It is completely bordered by shrubs, bushes, flowers, roses, oleander, lantana, petunia. If you could show number, actually when I go to B1. They're not showing up very well on the things. This is standing on the west edge of the tree, next between that's a rose bush on the left and the ash tree on on your left and ash tree on your right. These flower in the spring, of course, roses. Number 2, B2. This is, you can barely see me from scale. You can't really see much anything, can you? Me in the middle there, on the left side is a towering oleander. Well, there's actually a tree. In the middle of the oleander, of course, will be blooming white. It fills in the entire side yard or side of the house. The Lantana bush is on the right, cut below the level of the windows. And the next one, 3. This is me standing on the front porch. Again, the Lantana is on the left, and the petunia is on the right, and there's a pyracantha bush to your far right, which I try and maintain below the level of the roof and to the side of the front window there. The Lantana has beautiful flowers. If you've seen it, I think I took a few pictures of the flowers. Then I have the next one, maybe a few flowers. And the Lantana, very nice pink, yellow, blue, attracts lots of butterflies. They already started blooming in early February. It's a close-up of that. Next one. Now on the right side of the thing are the petunias, Mexican petunias, the blue or purple trumpet flower. And again, blooms all year long. They're fairly high. They grow to a height of about the knee. But if you try and trim them, they don't flower. They just become a very ugly stubble. Now the biggest, so the biggest objection to the yard, I think that the inspectors have, and maybe some of the neighbors as well, as the grass, because it's not your traditional lawn grass. It's not a turf grass cut low. It's allowed in the back of the yard and along the front, it's Bermuda grass, which is allowed to grow and mat down. The code requires that it be left less than 12 inches. And you can see that I'm holding a ruler there, and this was at the end of this is the Bermuda in the back, and it only comes up to about 3 or 4 inches. Still considerably longer than turf grass, but clearly longer. In the middle of the yard, I have what is called a fescue grass. Now, fescue is completely different from a turf grass. It grows in completely different fashion. It grows from tufts, basically from the center. It's like a little green fountain that shoots up. The center blades grow up as high as mostly 9 inches. Some of them can reach over 12 inches. And then they fall over and mat down around it. Around the central area. This is extremely, this is good for the climate. Because they mat down, they retain soil moisture. They keep the soil cool and moist, even through, I have biweekly irrigation in the summer. This is an irrigated lot. in the old section of Tempe, and they maintain soil moisture throughout the year. Throughout the hottest months of the summer. Because they're matted down, the old blades also rot and die, and therefore they self-fertilize. But it does look considerably different from the traditional turf lawn, and I suspect that is the reason most people object to the main objection that most people may have to my lawn is that it looks like a bunch of weeds growing up and falling over, where it is a type of grass, and of course it falls below the 12 inches, which is the limit. Even the longest weeds fall below the 12 inches, which is required, which is the maximum amount allowed by the code. Now, this type of lawn is actually far superior in environment and climate to the traditional turf grass lawn, because the turf grass lawn is cut very short. So it has to be, most people cut it very short, often as long as ½ inch, 1 inch, inch and a half. This is bad for the grass. Grass grows, of course, from the green, from the chloroform in the blades. So the more you cut it off, the less it is able to grow, the more stress it is under. This results in poor growth, requiring a constant application of fertilizers to keep it green and keep spots from dying. Because it's so short and it's such poor health, you also get rapid growth of weeds, and so most people have to require pesticides and weed killers. Also, all the mowing and cutting, of course, is done with gas lawnmowers, and gas lawnmowers are some of the most polluting in the world because they're small engines. They don't have the ability to filter and purify as the automobile engines have. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has said that 5%, as much as 5% of the pollution, the CO2 pollution in the United States, is being produced by lawnmowers and lawn care devices. The amount of CO2 produced by a single lawnmower, 10 horsepower, running for 15 minutes, just 15 minutes, to cover a small lawn is equivalent to, produces as much CO2 as a late model car driving with a 200 horsepower driving for a full hour. So depending on having short grass lawns, turf grass lawns, is clearly wasteful, very bad for the environment, both in terms of emissions and in terms of the chemicals needed to maintain it. There's a small issue that I'm going to skip for the moment because the inspector raised a issue in court over a bush that is in the front right corner of my yard, claiming that, well, he did see several burnt and dead branches. That's because I suffered an arson fire on that bush about a year ago. And the one corner was completely burned out. I'm slowly repairing it, allowing it to grow back, training vines and other plants to grow in front of it. I don't think the inspector ever fully understood that. So I do have some photos of it if we want to see it, but as I say, just explaining it I think should be sufficient. So the question is, or my claim is, that there's nothing in this yard that you have seen in the front yard that violates any section of the code. The code makes no requirements, allows cultivated plants. It specifies uncultivated, it prohibits uncultivated plants, but it places no limit on the height of cultivated plants, bushes and flower beds. As I say, I keep mine trimmed below the lows along the house, trimmed below the windows, and the roses are trimmed, and the petunias have to grow to their natural height, or they will not flower. The grass, as I pointed out, as I've shown you with pictures, is limited below the 12 inches that the code allows. So my question then is, what does the inspector want to abate? He has never specified to me, even though I've asked him several times over the course of a year, asked him in writing, specifically what he feels is wrong. The language he uses has always been very general, talking about in very general terms about neglect and decay and overgrowth and things like that. But as I said, it all falls within the existing code. I have the fear, I have the suspicion that what he really wants is a yard that looks like the houses on the first two that you saw. And I suspect that if you give him the power to abate, he will just send in the landscaper and cut everything down to the level of the ground, trying to make it look like the first two houses on the corner. This of course not only would ruin the effect, but it would also harm the plants, damaging the effect of the thing. As I said, this counts as a cool lawn. Cool in the sense of cooling temperatures. It's fully sustainable. It requires no mowing, no power tools. It requires no extra watering, no chemicals, no pesticides, no weed killers of any kind. It is, in my view, just the type of yard that the city of Tempe should be turning to, because it matches on an individual basis, on an individual yard basis, the goals of the climate action plan. Now, if the inspector is willing to specify, and I am sensitive that this does look quite different from most other yards on the block or in Tempe, and if people do feel that it should be cut back a little bit, then I'm willing to do so. All he has to do is specify what areas he wants cut, what plants, what heights he wants me to maintain, and I will do it. And if you all agree that that's a reasonable expectation for the attractiveness of the neighborhood, making it perhaps fit in a little better with the other houses, I'm quite willing to do that. But of course, I'm not going to agree to come in with a buzzsaw and cut everything down and try and make it look like the first two houses on the block. As I say, this case really divides into two main issues. The first being the front yard and the condition of the front yard and its supposed overgrowth or deterioration or whatever you want to call it. The second and more stubborn issue is a palm tree, which is in the backyard and which is for the most part not visible. Now, the inspector, of course, will be showing you, or perhaps has shown you in the packet of information he presented, close-ups of the subject palm taken from quite a distance away. Now, I'd like to show you what our street and the palm really looks like. If you can bring up section C, photograph C. This is what I call a walk down Elm Street, or excuse me, William Street. Again, the quality of the photographs is very poor, but this is looking across Elm Street, which is the cross street, down William Street, which is behind me in this photograph. It's a dead-end street, so there is no traffic except for the people who live on the street. This is looking from the west at the yield sign going into Elm Street. Draw your attention to the traffic circle on my left and a yellow diamond dead-end street just above my left shoulder, I guess, the right as you're looking at it. Number 2. If you can show number 2. This is me standing at the traffic circle looking down. Then number 3. This is at the dead end sign at the very beginning of the street. Moving further, next one. This is looking down the street from the center of the first house on the south side of the block. The next one. The second or third house, I believe. Looking at my yard, that's my yard to your right. The next one. This is my yard from across the street. This is in summer, of course. And the next one, my yard from the next street over, showing the driveway in the house. Now, even the quality is not what I would have hoped, but you're able, if you want, you can examine them in person. And my question, of course, where in this series of photographs do you see this offending palm tree that the city inspector considers to be a public nuisance? The answer is you can't see it, except in one photograph, the third one that I showed, I believe, which was, if you know exactly where to look, if you look further, you can see one palm tree far in the back, and that's the one that the inspector feels is against the code and has to be trimmed. Actually, from the distance you can see it. It's very hard to tell there are any palm fronds on it. It's a dead fronds on it. It's a very thick, tall palm tree. If you did trim all the dead fronds off it, it wouldn't look much different from what it does now, because it is so thick and wide. So the question is whether this is technically against the code. Now, but to read it, section 21-3 B8, a nuisance includes any one or more of the following condition. Any landscaping visible from public property that is substantially dead, damaged, or characterized by uncontrolled growth, or presents a sun-like appearance. That's a semicolon. Next phrase, uncultivated plants, weeds, tall grass, uncultivated shrubs, or growth, whether growing or otherwise, higher than 12 inches. Again, stress that it's uncultivated shrubs or growth higher than 12 inches. Any dead, third phrase, any dead trees, bushes, shrubs, or portions thereof, including stumps. And the last one, any palm or similar type tree having dead or dry fronds descending downward from the base, and it gives the measurements. Now, the claim that I am making is that when the City Council adopted this in 1999, they meant to restrict it to the front yard. So landscaping means land and the things growing on it visible from public property. Obviously, any land in the backyard is not visible, so things growing on it are not part of the code. This is supported by dictionary definitions of landscaping. This is also supported by my memory of the process during which the code was adopted in 1999. I was paying close attention at the time, was quite interested in civic affairs, and was attending most of the hearings. And I do remember the council saying, several of the council members saying explicitly, we don't want inspectors poking around in people's backyards. Now, this claim, of course, is subject to debate. A lot of people might argue over it, and some people do argue over it. When I presented the case to the city court, municipal court, the judge accepted all my arguments regarding the lawn and the grass in the front, but did not accept the argument about the palm tree. I appealed it to the Superior Court, that part of the decision, but it turns out that the appeal, the board, or the development, the inspector does not care about that. Code enforcement just went ahead and requested abatement, even though this issue has not been decided by a higher court. But it turns out that the Code Enforcement Division has tacitly, in fact, practically accepted this definition, and does not consider the palm tree sitting in the backyard whose roots and foundation and bottom is not visible from a street or other public property, not to be, well, you've gotten confused, too many knots, but does not consider, has not cited palm trees in similar condition. In 3 years ago, three and a half now, another inspector in code enforcement, Michael Glab, cited my same palm tree, and I met with him and Mr. Spencer, who was senior at the time, and presented my argument. They did not appear to accept it, and yet a few months later they dismissed the case, closed the case without pursuing the palm tree.
Mr. Van
So
Egmond,
therefore they tacitly accepted the palm in the backyard as being outside the scope.
Mr. Van Egmond,
There are also,
if I may, I think that we are following your basic points fairly thoroughly. I'm not sure. Are you having a hard time hearing me? All right. Well, I think we're following your basic points fairly well. And if you can just hit the remainder of your points, the exact history of everything that has happened, we've already read about. But if you just want to finish up your main points, I think we're following what you're trying to say. And
you hit me at the end, 2 more photographs I want to show. There are also 3 more palm trees in backyards. This is one on Cedar Street, and you can see it has a very large palm and has been that way for obviously many, many years. It has never been cited. And the next one, these are some more. There's one very close to the front. This is from Elm Street looking down the block, and another one much further back that you can't see very well in this photograph, which is also clear. So even the inspector does not consider certain backyard palms to be within the scope of the code. Now, another thing to consider is what exactly is the purpose and scope of the code. Suppose that you do insist on taking the code, taking this section of the code literally. What is it going to get you? In section 20, in the first section of the nuisances code, it lists 6 things that are called the purpose of this code or chapter of the code is to promote the health, safety, and welfare of Tempe and its residents, to protect neighborhoods against physical, visible, and economic deterioration. And it lists 6 items. Contribute or cause injury or endangerment, contrary to standards of decency, offensive to the senses, unlawful interference with public passages, obstruct the free use of property, damage to the thing. None of these things can be said to apply to this particular palm tree. Then we consider the cost-benefit analysis, what it will cost to trim it. This is a very tall palm, probably over 100 feet by now, very thick, very difficult to trim. It will, of course, be a danger to workers climbing up. Trimming palm trees is one of the most dangerous jobs in yard care. They will be using power tools, of course. The amount of CO2 produced will be considerable. We've already had a case, the city fully commit to reducing CO2 emissions. Clearly, this will be, trimming the palm tree at this point will produce CO2 emissions. Not only the power tools used to trim it, but also the trucks that will be carrying around the waste, carrying the old palms away. We have to factor in the amount of dust and dirt that will be raised in the process, the amount of noise that will be produced by the power saws, the amount of waste for the palms themselves and carrying them away.
Mr. Van Egmond.
Plus, of course, the damage to my surrounding plants and fences and so on.
I think we've heard you. You're making a basic point that you believe that there would be more damage caused by trimming this palm tree. We understand that. Can you go ahead and summarize your case for us?
That is the summary. I've just finished the main points. You can, of course, authorize the city to spend thousands of dollars in order to do all this. Not to mention paying 2 police officers to stand around and watch for however many days it may take. All in order to, first of all, clear a front yard of things I don't know what, but also to trim a palm tree that is basically invisible, that is no one sees most of the time, and that will make no difference in the appearance, because the difference between dead palms and skin and cut palms will be practically invisible, effectively invisible. Therefore, I would ask the Board of Adjustment to disallow the abatement process on this yard on the grounds that, one, it's not necessary, and doing so would cause more harm than benefit, and in particular would go against the decision of the city council to act as much as possible in favor of climate change, reducing emissions and reducing waste and things. Basically, I'm asking you to leave the yard as it is, as a green and sustainable model of what a 21st century yard should look like, producing oxygen. We all know that plants produce oxygen. Instead of going back to the 20th century and turning it back into a flat landscape that requires endless amounts of CO2 to maintain. So that concludes my basic remarks.
All right.
Sorry that.
All right, board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Van Egmond?
Can I come closer, or do I have to?
If it works for you, we'll have to record your responses in a microphone, but I think we can accommodate you if it's... Sure. Board members, any questions? Well, it looks like we don't have any questions for you at this time, so that's easy. All right, so we now have an opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone with us that wishes to make comment, we can accommodate you with 3 minutes. In order to do so, we would ask that you fill out a white card over here on this table and get it to a member of our staff so we can have that in our
Chairman
record.
Lyon, actually, staff does a presentation, then we take.
Now, I thought I heard you specifically say before we started that you wanted public comment before staff.
No,
Is
no,
that
no,
not
no,
so?
No, I did not. So let's argue about it.
All right. We'll thumb wrestle over it later.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
All right, so we'll do it the more conventional fashion then. So, if you please, is it Mr. Aaron?
Good evening, Chairman Lyon, members of the board, Robbie Aaron, Community Development. I'm going to make a brief presentation, and then I will refer all questions about the abatement process to code compliance. This is a request for an abatement of the Van Egmond property, excuse the typo up there, of an appealing the December 17, 2019 hearing officer's decision to allow the abatement of the property at 1620 East William Street. An aerial map, it's right directly in the middle on William Street on the north side. These are site photos taken by our code enforcement division when they visited the property. Some more site photos from there with regard to the code enforcement action. And this is showing the palm tree in question. A neighborhood meeting is not required. As far as public input, staff received 2 emails which I provided to you in opposition of the appeal and in support of the abatement of the property. Staff does not make a recommendation on this case. If you have any questions for me about process, I'm here to answer them. Any questions about the abatement process leading up to this, I will refer to code enforcement, Mr. Tamulevich and Mr.
All right, board members, questions for staff and code enforcement? Board member Cullens?
This question may not be for you, Mr. Arrington, but Mr. Eggman made a statement that when he went to municipal court that he felt that they found in his favor except for the palm tree. But I'm looking at a note in our packet, a memo from September 26th, and it states that on 7/11/2019, Mr. Eggman was found responsible for the violations by our court system. So there's in our packet, the results of that court finding are not here. Can someone address what the court found?
Board Member Cullens, my name is Jeff Tamulevich. I'm the Code Compliance Administrator. The results of that court hearing were that he was found responsible for the deteriorated landscaping. So while there was discussion about the grasses and palm tree and other items during that court procession, the fact of the matter is he was found responsible at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Is that, I guess the question of staff, is that something we normally do not have in our packet? I think this is the first case.
You'll have time to respond later.
And I'd also like to mention that these are 2 completely separate processes. Obviously, the court hearing is completely different than the abatement hearing. I would like to introduce Hector Heredia. He's the inspector on the case. He'll tell you a brief history of the case, and hopefully he'll be able to answer any questions that you have as well. Real quickly, I would like to hopefully simplify things for everybody at this moment. Right now, as the case stands, the only thing in violation as of today is the palm tree in the back. So all of the items that Mr. Van Egmond spoke about at the beginning of his presentation are not of concern to the Code Compliance Division. unless, of course, they become in violation again. But the only thing that we would be addressing if we were going to go in and abate the property would be the palm tree at this time. Okay?
I do have a follow-up question. So if that's the case, then the quote that we have from Artistic Land Management in our packet is for the total abatement. It's not just for the palm tree.
That's
Do we have an
correct.
updated quote for just the palm tree?
It would be reduced according to. In other words, when the artistic goes out there and they abate the tree, the abatement costs for the additional grass removal and shrub removal would be eliminated from that bid.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just a follow-up question then to what was stated. So when we're looking at, the notice of intents to abate, they've always referenced the palm tree and the landscaping in the front. When was the decision made? Is that just a recent decision made that the landscaping in the front is fine and it's no longer a nuisance?
This week, that's correct. The grasses in the front have been trimmed down to 12 inches or less. We realize there's accent grass, as Mr. Van Egmond has stated. It's the grasses that fall between those accent grasses that have always been the concern to the City of Tempe Code Compliance Division. With respect to the shrubs, I know he had mentioned that overgrown vegetation had been identified as a violation, but this is not the case. Overgrown vegetation is not a violation per city code. Unless it's actually obstructing city right of way. So there were some dead areas of shrubs that were in the front yard which have been addressed at this time. That's why that portion of the violation has also been taken off the table.
Thank you.
Yes. So at this time, I'll have Hector come up and give you a brief history of the case, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board. Hector Heredia, Code Inspector for Community Development Code Enforcement for approximately 7 years, April 1st of this year. I have my notes that I will be reading through so that nothing is missed. If any questions come up, please do not hesitate to stop me. I will be more than willing to answer whatever question comes up. I visited the single-family residential property 1620 East William Street this morning and determined it is still in violation according to City Code Section 21 3B8 regarding overgrown dead palm fronds on a tree that is visible for multiple public access points. Any violations found during the abatement that was approved at the officer hearing meeting will be addressed. As of today, City Record and Maricopa County both identify the property owner as Mr. Warren Van Egmond, The property owner, Mr. Van Egmond, has been made aware of the violation on site and was provided ample time to bring the property into compliance. The case before you this evening, CE 190735, was generated by complaints we received from the public. On 1/30 of 2019, I state, public complaints generated a case at 1620 East William Street. I visited the property and confirmed there was deteriorated landscape in the front yard, including dead palm fronds and a camper in the front yard setback area. On 2/14 of 2019, I state, an inspection found no corrective action had been taken and a final notice was issued. On 3/6 of 2019, I state, an inspection found no corrective actions had been taken. I dropped off a business card at the property to the property owner to contact me with a plan of action. On 3/8, I received an email from Mr. Van Egmond. I granted him an additional 30 days to bring the property into compliance in consideration of what his situation was. On 3/28, an inspection found very little corrective action had been taken. I will wait until the end of the extension period before moving forward with any other action. On 4/4 of 2019, I was advised by administration that 2 additional weeks have been granted until April 22nd of 2019 to Mr. Van Edmond that has been directly emailed with expectations and deadlines by administration. I will continue monitoring the progress of the progress for the duration of the extension period. On 4/22 of 2019, an inspection found no corrective action had been taken. A final extension until Friday, May 3rd, was advised to be the final effort to reach Mr. Van Egmond about his responsibilities. An inspection found on 5/3 of 2019 no corrective action had been taken, and a second final notice was sent. On 5/23 of 2019, an inspection found no corrective action had been taken. I will meet with my supervisor to discuss moving forward with enforcement. On 5/28 of 2019, an inspection found no corrective action had been taken. A citation was issued for City Code 21-3B8 and the same violations outlined in all corrective notices. On 5/31 of 2019, received more online complaints regarding grass and weeds at the property. On 6/11 of 2019, I was scheduled for a court hearing on July 11th at 2 p.m. On 7/11, a court hearing found the property owner, Mr. Van Egmond, responsible for the violations by a judge. A third final notice was issued allowing an additional 2 weeks before the abatement process was initiated. On 8/14 of 2019, after a lengthy extension period due to personal medical leave, I inspected the property and found no corrective action had been taken. A fourth final notice was sent with a 1-week extension, and subsequently on 8/23 of 19, an inspection found no corrective action had been taken. I received an email from Mr. Van Egmond stating that the case was up for review by Superior Court, but we never received any type of certified mail or paperwork from Superior Court, so we continued with our process. On 8/28 of 2019, an inspection found no corrective action had been taken, and we have not received a subpoena from Superior Court about the appeal submitted by Mr. Van Egmond. I continue to wait for any documentation to be presented by the court. On 9/9 of 2019, an inspection found, again, no corrective action had been taken, so I moved forward with the abatement submittal. We had not received any paperwork from Superior Court. On 9/23 of 2019, I met with the abatement contractor to assess the property for a proper abatement estimate and submitted for the next scheduled hearing officer on November 5th of 2019. A notice for the hearing was posted to the property, and on 11/5 of 2019, the case was postponed to the December 17 hearing officer. An updated hearing notice was posted to the property. On 12/17 of 2019, the property was approved by abatement by the hearing officer for a 14-day appeal. The property was approved for abatement by the hearing officer after a 14-day appeal period. And on 12/31 of 2019, the case was postponed for abatement due to scheduling of the BOA, Board of Adjustment, for review on the February 26, 2020 date. An inspection found no corrective actions had been taken. And subsequently this morning, 2/26/2020, I inspected the property today again and found no corrective action had been taken regarding the final portion of what the violations were regarding the dead palm fronds on the tree that is visible from multiple public access points. We have had 2 cases for deteriorated landscaping in the past 4 years, resulting in 40 inspections at the property. The first case took 112 days to come into compliance. The currently active case has been open for 392 days as of today, more than a year. During this time, we sent the property owner, Mr. Van Egmond, 10 notices of violation, granted 7 extensions ranging 2 weeks up to 30 days, and the city has well exceeded the normal amount of time for compliance for a case of this, for the case with these types of violations. We have offered all our assistance programs and granted these extensions in hope of working with the property owner. The complaining neighbors have been more than patient with our process, and so today we are hoping the decision can be made, and so today we are hoping the decision made by the hearing officer is supported by this board and we are able to move forward with our process. As of today, I have also brought in the most current photos outlining multiple public access points where the tree is clearly visible that are outlined in the Maricopa County Assessor's insert on the prompt. I can go over them with you if you'd like, but
I think we're okay.
okay.
I think we've been rather exhaustive so far tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Heradia. Do we have any questions for Mr. Heradia or for Robbie Aaron or Mr. Temelovich? One of these days I'll pronounce it correctly. I'm sorry. I'm still working on it. Any questions for staff?
I
Board
have no
Member
questions.
Collins.
Excuse me.
Board Member Collins, please.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Radia for the detailed documentation he's provided and for the details that he went over here in the room. They're very helpful.
Vice Chair Frazee.
I do have a question then. Obviously the city is wanting to make sure that, these are all maintained. Since the appellant did present 2 other cases, public record, similar palm trees, are those now on notice of violations? And
No, because as Mr. Mr. Van Egmond stated, I do not proactively look into backyards unless directly brought to my attention by the public, at which point I do have authority or the obligation to take a look. But I will not proactively drive through alleys looking in backyards for front yard violations, which is my main job duty. Although in this particular case, that particular violation was clearly brought to our attention via anonymous complaints, had no other option but to go out there and could clearly verify without a doubt that particular concern was clearly in violation of our code. I did not have to look in the backyard. It is clearly visible from multiple access points in his general vicinity in that square block area.
thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. All right, so now we'll come to our public comment section. If there's anyone with us that wishes to make comment, we can accommodate you with 3 minutes of time to speak your mind. Is there anyone with us that wishes to make comment? Seeing none.
Am I able to make comments at this time? Do I need to fill it in?
I wouldn't be opposed. I would be willing to accept that you're not part of the application team and instead treat you as your concerned citizen, if that's how you want to. Sure. Now, we do have to do protocol. We need you to speak at the podium into the microphone so it can be recorded, and we will also need you to fill out a card when you're done so we have for the records. If you'd state your name,
Jim
please.
Delton, Tempe resident, many years. I just wanted to clarify a couple things.
Obviously, I'm with Warren, and I'm helping him a little bit on this and taking some photos for him. But I was also at the court hearing that's been referenced. I think it was July 11th. We had the court hearing. There was a ruling made at the court hearing, but neither Warren or I have ever been able to figure out what the ruling was. The judge made a ruling that when we heard it appeared to say she was basically discounting everything except the palm tree. We were never able to find, Warren was never given any written paperwork as an outcome from the court case. Never received anything. I've never been able to find anything. We've tried to look at the video to see if we could hear more clearly what was being said. It was extremely fuzzy. So we're not even clear what the outcome of the court hearing was. In our mind, the outcome was the palm tree was still up for abatement. The rest of it, the court had said we don't see a problem. The other thing I wanted to mention, it wasn't clear to me when the city was presenting its case. They did mention something about complaints and seemed to be implying that for this hearing there were two people who were in favor of the abatement and nobody against the abatement. But when I look through the documentation that's on the city's website for today's hearing, there's one letter that's against Warren's position, and there are two letters that were submitted there via email that are for Warren's position. In other words, there are two that are saying, we hope you aren't made to abate this. And there's one that says we would like to see it abated. So in terms of the hearing you folks are engaged in right now, there's one person says they'd like it abated that's gone on the record, and there's two people who said they hope Warren does not have to do the abatement. I find Warren's reasoning fairly interesting. Tempe has gone a long way into doing the sustainable thing. He's trying to be sustainable. I understand people can have different opinions as to how things look. It's a little bit subjective. And as to the palm tree, there are many palm trees that you do not need to go into people's backyard to see that are in people's backyard. I will not characterize this as Warren being singled out by the city, because I don't think he's being singled out in a punitive sense. I do think because of the nature of the process, people who complain make other people a target for things that there are many other people who could be made a target for, but who aren't, but are doing exactly the same thing. There are many palm trees in Tempe that look like Warren's, and nobody's complaining about them, and so nothing's being done about them. And when I say done about them, I don't mean to imply I'm saying something needs to be done. I'm only saying nothing's being done about them in terms of what the city believes its task is to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is there anyone else with us that wishes to make public comment? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment section. And Mr. Van Egmond, if you would like to come back to the podium and address the things that you've heard. I will say, I think we've been pretty exhaustive tonight. I favor brevity and pithy remarks. So if you wish to respond, I would suggest that brief. Okay. I like brevity. Oh, brevity. Yes, I find it more powerful.
Mr. Delton has already talked about the situation in the court, so I think there's no need to do that. I just want to characterize or summarize the year-long process by which I have dealt with Mr. Heredia. From the very first citation or notice I received, I reached out to him via emails and even hand-delivered letters to ask for clarification. Because of my hearing, I asked for a meeting in the office where I could hear clearly and be able to write notes so that we could be completely clear on what he wanted me to do. He refused to meet me in the office. I appealed to Mr. Tomulevich in a separate email asking for a meeting with the three of us. Mr. Tomulevich also turned me down. At that point, I went over his head and wrote to Chad Weaver, the Director of Community Development, complaining that the department was refusing to meet with me. And something was happening because there was a 2-month interval where nothing happened, but I never received any word from Mr. Weaver or from the department again, except to receive the court date. There was something else I wanted to say, but since you're interested in brevity, I've forgotten. So, thank you.
All righty. Mr. Aaron, you look like is there something you need to say? You look like you're eager to come back to us.
Chairman Lyon and members of the board, I just wanted to clarify that the 2 emails that were received were that I handed you out today were for this particular case. The emails that were referred to during public comment were for the hearing officer case, so that's why they were in your packet. I personally did not receive those. The ones before you today, I personally received with regard to this case in front of you at the Board of Adjustment.
All right, thank you. All right, board members. So, what are your thoughts?
Chair.
Yes, Board Member Key, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, staff. Thank you for the appellant. The information was very, very forthcoming. The question that was asked regarding what we've narrowed this down to was very telling in my mind, and we're only talking about the palm fronds. So thank you for that clarification. That made it a lot easier for me to make these following observations. The palm fronds, in my opinion, are clearly visible from the public right-of-way. I've read the ordinance. I've read the specific sections of the ordinance. I also believe that they are in violation of that specific section of the ordinance. Notwithstanding the Superior Court appeal that you've made, the current court has ruled that it is a violation, and so that's what we need to take into effect when we make our determination. So based on all those factors, once we've heard from the rest of the members of the board, I'm willing to make a motion.
Board Member Baker.
I 100% agree with everything you just said. My one and only question is, I still feel like we should have some sort of figure of what this abatement amount would be. This billing doesn't break down per task. So do we have an idea? It's kind of, that's so general to me. I'm used to having more of a figure. You know what I mean, as far as a quote.
Yeah, no, I understand your concerns, Board Member Baker. The fact of the matter is, when we receive our estimates from these contractors, they are looking at the entirety of the case. So we don't have the ability to give you a specific number. What we will tell you is that it is not going to be more than what what that estimate shows. I will tell you, though, that in this case, the trimming of that palm tree is probably the majority of that estimate, if that will give you a better idea.
Yes, thank you. That helps.
The work in the front yard was very minor. Thank you.
Other comments? Board Member Collins?
Again, I agree with the statements that have been made so far, and it helps to clarify that it is now just the palm tree that needs to be abated. And I would just like to make a suggestion that when a motion is put forward, that the motion clearly states the abatement to go forward on the palm tree only, because we do not have documentation here showing those updates.
Vice Chair Frazee.
I would agree with that comment and the comment previously from Chairperson Baker that a motion would include an adjustment to the abatement amount based on what is going to be taking place.
All right. Any other comments? I'll jump in just to say I agree with what the four of you have said. It's just the palm tree. Clean it up. So, other comments, or shall we have a motion? Let's hear a motion, how about, because I don't see any more forthcoming comments.
Thank you. I move to deny the appeal of the December 17th, 2019 hearing officer's decision to approve the abatement of the public nuisance item specifically and limited to the dead palm fronds on the palm tree located in the rear property located at 1620 East Williams Street.
I second the motion.
Okay, question for staff. Do we need that stipulation? Is that not what we're already addressing?
You're referring to the stipulation as just the palm tree?
Yes.
I think it provides clarity and should be in the motion.
All right, fair enough. All right, so motion from Board Member Keegi and seconded by Board Member Baker. Again, to clarify, a yes vote, if this motion passes, will have the effect of denying the appeal, thereby sustaining the hearing officer's decision that the abatement go forward. So, all those in favor by show of hands, please. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. All right. Are there any items of business that we should do updates on, or we've already discussed the agenda for next month?
No. Thank you.
All right then. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your time, and we are adjourned.